The first official event of Regulation H has now concluded, and there is no better time to hit you guys with the updated tier list of the format. Of course, with tier lists, guys, these are opinionated videos. I would love to hear your thoughts down below, whether I missed something, ranked something too high. You guys let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the format, where everything is sitting. Let's fuel that discussion down below. But with that, I say we jump into things, starting off with the best of the best. And there should really be no surprise here that Archaeolodon remains the top dog of the format. It won, not only did it win the regional, it had a very strong showing, and it is still incredibly difficult and meta defining to deal with. It is still around. We know what it does, whether it's the electro shot, whether you're boosting your defenses with stamina and then dropping body presses. It is not going anywhere in this format. It is presumably staying as one of the top dogs for the rest of Regulation H. There's going to be ways creeping up to get around it. We've seen a lot more fighting types. We're going to see a lot of those fighting types throughout this list as well. We've seen some ways to deal with it, so it's definitely not like crazy broken anymore, but it's still very strong. Followed suit by that is Goldengo, and there's no surprise after Baltimore. I think there were 5 or 6 of them in top 8. This Pokemon is still incredibly strong. It's not going anywhere either, and as I say before, and every time we discuss why Goldengo is so good, it turns out being immune to at least 1/3 of the moves in the game is incredible, followed by the Ghost Steel typing, ability to set up, ability to go offense right away. This Pokemon is incredible. It's going to be around, and there's no surprise to me that it's staying at the best of the best, and I'd be shocked if later on when I do the finalized tier list here, it goes down. It's not moving from here. The next 3 I didn't really rank in terms of order here. The first 2 are probably ranked, Archaeolodon followed by Goldengo. These 3 are very close and are definitely fighting for that number 3 spot right now. We're going to start with King Gambit though. It's the format of steel types, right? For whatever reason, in a format where there are very few fairies, these massive steel types are going crazy. There's also a few ground types, so it doesn't really surprise me, but King Gambit is a Pokemon where its lowest stat, I believe, is 85. And that's on its special defense. You pair this thing with either an Assault Vest, or you can just go crazy with the setup option, the more aggressive option as well. Serves a lot of niches that the teams just don't have right now. You know, anti-intimidate, especially with Incineroar picking back up. You've got just really good coverage move, big dark type damage, which is very good, especially into stuff like Goldengo. You get a couple Swords Dances up, or even one Swords Dance and a Terra Dark. Your Sucker Punch is probably picking up the Archaeolodons. There's a lot going on for King Gambit. It allows you to play the game where, hey, I now have a Pokemon that can just win versus a lot of the rest of the meta, and as long as I play that well, it's going to work out for me. And I think that is very strong, and just anytime you can get a Pokemon that has that option, I think it's very strong. And y'all better sign your apology forms, and I mean myself included. I had Incineroar probably too low on the last tier list I did as well. But Incineroar, Amoonguss, guys, time and time again, everybody dismisses them at the beginning of formats. Oh, Amoonguss, it's not quite as good as what they once were. And then you show up to the regional, and it's on 5 of the top 8 teams, if not 6 of the top 8 teams. And it's like, wow, I didn't expect these guys to still be good. Guys, you got to start putting some respect on Incineroar and Amoonguss' names. They are going to be around. At this point, we know what they do, right? There's no need to discuss, you know, the redirection, the insane bulk, the ability to put things to sleep, or the intimidate, the fake out, the ability to pivot with either a parting shot or a U-turn. Right? There's no reason to discuss that right now. We all know what they do. We all know what they can bring to a team. And it was only a matter of time before they found their way into a format. And they found their way into the format and came out to play in the Baltimore Regionals. And I think you're going to see them sitting around as best of the best category, because time and time again, they just keep doing it. And it's incredible that they just keep doing it. They are incredible Pokemon, and you are going to see them around the rest of this metagame right now. In terms of now moving on to the solid options, regular Ursaluna had an incredible day in Baltimore. We saw a lot of those Ursaluna Porygon 2 teams. We'll get into Porygon 2 in a bit. But we saw a lot of those Ursaluna P2 teams. They picked up in usage. And I don't think people were ready for this physical Ursaluna. We talked a lot last time about the Blood Moon Ursaluna, which you may have noticed is not even on the top 2 tiers anymore. But this physical Ursaluna, the original Ursaluna, it's ready to go. It came to play, And it's just shown why, you get under Trick Room and you just start sending facades, headlong rushes. I believe a lot of the Porygon 2 Ursaluna teams also had Substitute, and I think that's a very nice touch for this Pokemon as well. Because to get out of Trick Room, you normally want to like protect a couple pieces. But then if you try to go for that, then the Substitute comes up and it's very, very difficult to take down behind a Substitute. Not a lot of special attackers in the format right now, and that's kind of the big weak point for Ursaluna. So having those not really be too relevant is really, really strong moving forward. It's a ground type to beat the steel types as well. Like, it pretty much decimates the entire top tier. As I'm looking at this right now, it almost decimates my entire top tier. Amoonguss is a little back and forth because it can be built to survive the facade and stuff like that. But still, as a whole, you're burned, so you don't care about getting put to sleep. So you can probably say Ursaluna beats the entire top tier here. No doubt in my mind, it's going to be a solid option moving forward in the format. Rillaboom, however, Rillaboom's a little bit on fraud watch, okay? I don't want to write this Pokemon off because like Incineroar, like Amoonguss, it has the tools to do very, very well. And I think it is still a very strong Pokemon. But as a whole, it definitely, after Baltimore, it's on fraud watch, okay? It was on 0 out of the top 8 teams. And I'm not sure if that's just because, Psychic Spam maybe had a poor day, so Rillaboom didn't really excel as much, because I feel like if Psy Spam had a really strong day, Rillaboom in turn would have also had a really strong day. So I don't want to write off Rillaboom, but definitely the way the meta is headed right now, right? You've got the 3 big steel types, which Rillaboom just doesn't want to deal with. Incineroar and Amoonguss both creeped up. It pretty much, in that case, in that sense, Rillaboom loses to the entire top tier. So it just doesn't feel like it's as slappable on teams anymore. However, I'm not putting this Pokemon down too far because I still think Rillaboom is a very strong option in this metagame. And it's a lot of pressure onto the water types that we'll get into in a bit, because there is a fair chunk of water types that are creeping around right now. And I think having that grass typing, the big offensive grass typing, is still very, very strong. Indeedee, like I said, Psy Spam did not have a great day. However, what Indeedee brings to the table in this format is still incredible. When I say Psy Spam didn't have a great tournament, I mean, I'm talking the sense of like the Hatterene, the Armarouge, the hard Trick Room Psy Spam with like the Lilycoals. Those didn't have a great showing in Baltimore. But Indeedee, obviously still very, very good. We actually saw a couple Delphox teams excel over the weekend with Indeedee and Delphox, that faster Psy Spam option. And I think that's where Indeedee wants to fit in this format. Because yes, are those hard Trick Room, hard Psy Spam teams still good? Absolutely. But I think being able to go with the fast Psy Spam is something a lot of teams just aren't ready for in this format. And that definitely allows Indeedee to do things, right? Because you're still getting that Psychic Terrain up. Terrain control is awesome. Psychic Terrain is incredible, not getting faked out. No priority moves going into you, especially with those setup Sucker Punch King Gambits going around. You also have the... Just the redirection as well is really good. You get to do a lot of things going for you. If you have a faster team, maybe you have Indeedee in the back now. There's a lot you can do with Indeedee that's just outside of those hard, dedicated Psy Spam Trick Room teams. And I think we're going to see that as the format develops. I don't think Indeedee is going anywhere. This Pokemon is one of the best redirectors in the format, and I don't think it's going anywhere. We're going to see it a lot. Annihilate had another incredible day. Not so much the Mouse Ape stuff, but more so just Annihilate in general. Whether it was those Assault Vest Annihilapes that we're picking up with the final Gambit, whether it was the Choice Scarf Annihilate with the coaching going around where you can just coach your Dragonite that we saw, I believe it was top 8 on Lorenzo's team, where you're just able to coach up the Dragonite, and then all of a sudden you have an Assault Vested Dragonite at +1 attack, +1 defense, and it's just launching out damage left and right? So seeing Annihilate being around more than just those, those side beat ups with the mice, I think really just speaks of how good of a Pokemon it actually can be, especially with the ability to terrestrialize, get out of some certain weaknesses, and frankly, there's not that many things right now that actually hit this Pokemon, right? Yes, the flying types are around, but there's not that many of them. Yes, the fairy types, they're around, but there's not that many of them. And Annihilate has the potential to just be fast, has that option, I think, with the final Gambit as well, to really just turn a game on its head, really force things against your opponent. Because, you can just final Gambit something. I don't want this piece on the field anymore. Okay, I'm going to remove it here. And if your opponent's not careful, that's a very free play for you to make. Yes, you lose a piece, but you're okay to trade a piece for a piece that's just going to... for a piece that's going to bother the rest of your team. Like if I have a King Gambit and they only have one answer to King Gambit and I go King Gambit Annihilate, if I can get that final Gambit off onto that piece that's going to kill my King Gambit, it's gone. And all of a sudden, I don't mind losing my ape because now my King Gambit is in the clear to clean the rest of the game. That's just a random example. There's all kinds of them. You can 100% use this in different ways as well. But that was just one example why I think Final Gambit on this Pokemon is so good. It gives it that extra element of I can't just sit in front of this thing anymore. And because of that, I definitely think the Final Gambit version is a little bit better. But the beat-up version is still around. We'll talk about the mice in a bit as well. Really, really strong. Dragonite, still good, guys. I believe I had Dragonite a lot lower on my initial list. But this Pokemon is still good. I was worried about it being a fraud without the damage boost from Shenpao. But this Pokemon is incredible. In a format that's as, I guess, low-powered as this one, there's some offensive options, obviously. But as a slower offensive format, Dragonite, with the bulk that it can have, the inner focus to stop intimidates, or you can go multi-scale and try to like set up things and not take as much damage right off the bat. There's a lot of options to go for with Dragonite. We've seen the Terra flying ones. They had an actual great day rocking that Terra Blast, looking for that much needed flying type offense that's in the format right now. And Dragonite definitely fulfills that role. I think it's a very good Pokemon. You have a lot of coverage options, whether you're going Stomping Tantrum, Earthquake, Low Kick, Ice Spinner. Lots and lots of options on these Dragonites right now. And I'm curious to see where it sits in the meta, because I think with a Pokemon with the stats and as many options as Dragonite, it's going to be around. Porygon 2. Now, similar to, the King Gambit stuff here, Porygon 2 is just kind of a Pokemon that does it all in a sense, where if there's no answer to it, it is winning the game, right? And that's what we see with Porygon 2 here. It does not go down easily. You have to commit a lot of resources to deal with the Porygon 2. We saw it do incredibly well on those Porygon 2, Ursaluna, Incineroar, Amoonguss type of teams. I believe there were two of them in the top 4. Two of them in the top 8 maybe, 4th and 5th, I think. I might be misremembering that. But either way, that team had an incredible day. And Porygon 2 is one of the key answers for that, right? It's the slower offensive format. You have to commit resources to removing these Porygon 2s. And a lot of the time, you just can't commit those resources quickly enough because they're paired with, the Incineroars, the Amoongusses. They're healing themselves back up, There's so much defensive pressure on that side of the board. By the time you kill them, something else has already removed you. You are losing damage trades more often than not versus the Porygon 2. So if you can have a piece that just is really difficult to die, sets Trick Room, regenerates health on its own as well. Really good piece, very difficult to take down, and just the download boost just gives you that chance to just be aggressive still. We saw a lot of Terra fighting to start dealing with those King Gambits. We saw a lot of, I think we saw Terra Ghost actually was the highest placing P2. But a lot of cool things on this Porygon 2, a lot of options for it. And in a format where offense is hard to come by, having a piece that can sit there and just regain some health is incredibly, incredibly solid. I think Porygon 2 is going to be around for the rest of this format, despite, and it may not even be on the P2 or Saluna things. Don't get me wrong, they're going to be very good, but I don't think that's going to be like it has to be on those types of teams. I think we're going to start seeing Porygon 2 branch off to some other builds, and I'm curious to see how that goes. Sneasler. Sneasler was a Pokemon that I think it was like the somewhat good category on that first tier list, and then I teased the thumbnail by putting top tier and pointed at a Sneasler. Turns out I was right, because apparently this Pokemon is just kind of goated. It had an absolutely incredible weekend at the Baltimore Regionals, whether it was the Unburdened stuff, whether it was the Focus Sash Poison Touch, and when you can go as fast as Sneasler does, you can either use it for coaching, you can use it for just a fake out Poison Touch, give yourself extra chances to poison. It is the definition of putting RNG in your favor without putting RNG against you. Like Rock Slide, great, you now have the option to flinch, but you can also miss. Sneasler, Dire Claw, 100% accurate, can't really miss, and you get a 50% chance to land one of 3 statuses. It's incredible. You are putting RNG in your favor. You add that with Poison Touch right now, and like Poison Touch Fake Out, 30% chance to poison something and not let them move that turn because you're clicking Fake Out. I mean, sign me up. The Pokemon is incredibly good. It's one of the faster Pokemon in the format because we do not have a lot of speed right now. And just puts on a lot of pressure because the fighting type offense right now is hitting all those steel types up top. Obviously, that Goldengo is a little bit of a problem for it, but you can patch that with some other pieces. Sneasler, been an incredibly strong option despite its frailness right now. Just being able to pressure that big fighting offense, Dire Claw for like get out of jail free cards, and still just genuinely good damage overall. Sneasler is going to be a Pokemon. I'm more so curious of if it sticks around. I feel like once people are prepared for it, it's going to fall off a little bit because it is rather frail. However, I think those Focus Sash variants with the Dire Claw, with that Poison Touch, I don't think they're going anywhere. It does swing games into your favor, and I think it's okay if your opponent is ready for it because they still have to focus up on the Sneasler. And if they don't, well, then Sneasler potentially goes crazy. It's a very good mon with a lot of good benefits going for it with RNG capabilities. I think it's not going anywhere. Primarina is the biggest fraud in my solid options list by far. This Pokemon feels horrible and amazing at the exact same time. Primarina is like, I don't know, I feel like it's like a little bit of a higher defense stat away from actually being goated. And like you either build it offensively and then you feel very frail on the defense side, or you build it defensively and then you feel very frail or very weak on the offensive aspect of things. So it feels like it's a little bit kind of that in-between point right now. I think out of necessity for water types and fairy types, Primarina is very, very strong, and it is going to be one of your most solid options in this format. In terms of both of those, you get Haze to deal with some of the setup shenanigans. It is still a very strong mon, but it just feels a little fraudulent out of these top options. It's great, you know, like I said, you get the big damage with Moonblast, Hyper Voice, big spread, water attack, starts dealing with those Incineroars, and it's a good mon overall. It just feels a little fraudulent, but out of necessity, I think it's going to be up here, just because it serves a couple niches that a lot of things just don't have and can't fit into one slot, and Primarina does exactly that. Flamigo had an incredible day in Baltimore, once again on those Porygon 2 Ursaluna teams. This was a team that picked up a ton as of late, saw a lot of potential, saw a lot of hype going into the format, and I'm not sure if people just didn't respect it enough or said, oh, my lines are probably fine, but it had an incredible day. I feel like there was like at least 5 or 6 of them in day 2 alone. 2 of them made top 8. Well, one made top 4, one made top 8. So it's an incredibly strong team. And Flamigo is one of those options, right? Just that fighting type option that hits hard and hits fast. You know, you pair this with the ability Scrappy, so now you're hitting Goldengo super effectively. You're removing King Gambits from the board. You're removing Archaludons from the board because they tend to go Terra Stellar. So you're just able to pick up big offensive options into a lot of what is very strong in the offensive metagame right now. And you can just do a lot, right? Like Archaludon doesn't want to be there. It's gone. Goldengo doesn't want to be there. It's gone. King Gambit doesn't want to be there. And you're either forcing a Terra off of these pieces, or you're just or you're just preventing them from coming, or you're just killing them. So it's a very strong option, and I really like it on that Porygon 2 team. I am a little wary of if it's actually going to pull out away from those Ursaluna P2 teams, or if it's going to kind of just be, I'm on this team, and this is the archetype that I fit on. And that's kind of the only spot I'm going to be. So I'm a little scared that I might have it a little inflated right now, just off like those Baltimore success rates. But overall, I think it's a very interesting mon. Scrappy, just the ability to launch CCs and really have no immunities to it, feels incredible. And then the Focus Sash. Focus Sash has been one of my favorite items in this format. I am an Assault Vest lover. I love the move, the item Assault Vest. That is my favorite item in the game by far. But Focus Sash in this format feels so incredible, especially on some of these frailer offensive options like that Sneasler, like this Flamigo. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it as the format develops, just because it forces people to double into you, or it just lets you get 2 big attacks off, which is really, really strong. Moving on to the good category right now. I am going to speed this up rather quickly, because I do want to get through the good category, and I definitely still have a lot of other categories to go through as well. But Salamence has actually picked up in usage quite a bit. It looks very, very strong, and I think what really sparked this one was the Victory Road online tour there, where the Salamence Archaludon kind of just won that tournament. I don't think anyone was really expecting Salamence to do incredible things. Now, obviously, it was a good Pokemon before that, but that was really what I think caused the uptick in Salamence usage. And now we're seeing on other variants of teams. We're seeing it on Rain, which we knew about. We're seeing it, I've seen a little bit on Sand as well. I've seen a lot of things happen with the Salamence. It's one of the better intimidators in the format. You get special offense, which is flying coverage, which is very nice. You get options like Draco, Meteor, Tailwind. You can do a lot with this piece, and I think it's very, very strong moving forward. Curious to see if it holds in the metagame or if it happens to fall off. The Mice. As we all know, Mousehold has won that regional, and not the, I don't think it was the like the Friend Guard super bulky set that we were expecting to. This was just one of those fast population bombs, and I'm just gonna send this damage off, and we saw that do exactly that in finals. It just removed things before things could hit it, and when you have the ability to do that with a Pokemon, it becomes a very good piece. And now Mousehold, not only does it do that on its own, but the way Nicholas built their team, the championship team, you could also population bomb your own Archaludon and get yourself to +6 defense very easily, immediately almost. And if their answers into Archaludon were physical, it's just that secondary option from this Mice. That population bomb, being able to use it defensively and offensively when paired with Archaludon is incredibly, incredibly strong. And I think the Mice, just given the versatility, given the I can be offensive, I can be fast, and then all of a sudden I'm just going to click follow me instead of attacking, I think give it a lot of versatility in this metagame. It's going to stick around. It's going to be a very strong option. Basculegion and Pelipper, I'm kind of just going to group together here. Pelipper, by far the best rain setter, and of course Basculegion, one of the best rain abusers in this format. We've seen a lot of Swift Swim, Choice Band stuff on those rain teams. That's where you're going to see Basculegion more often than not. And it just puts on a lot of pressure. And it pairs so well with stuff that, like the Archaludon, that, you know, doesn't love seeing those ground types. Now you have a rain mode on the team. You have that Basculegion, which is putting on a lot of pressure. And you just, okay, water moves don't work. Everything else on my team is dead. I'm going to launch a 150 base power, choice banded Last Respects. And it's just going to go incredible, right? Like, the damage potential from this piece is huge. You get a lot of burst damage. It's going to be around. It is by far the best rain abuser and one of the better water types in the format, which honestly I never thought I'd say about a Basculegion. It always felt like a mix-up Pokemon. But Basculegion being here, definitely very, very strong. Talonflame, probably one of the weaker Tailwind setters, but it still sees a lot of success in the format. Priority Tailwind is not going anywhere, right? You are going to see Priority Tailwind be a thing. So Talonflame on those hyper offense teams, you are going to see it stick around. Presumably with one of the next two Pokemon on this list as well, with either the Garchomp or the Tyranitar, both of which are very strong options when paired with Talonflame. And I don't know, just Priority Tailwind, Will-O-Wisp option, Taunt option, Flare Blitz, Brave Bird, you're going to see Talonflame be around. It's a good Pokemon. T-Tar, really, really strong, but a lot more niche in terms of the matchups you're able to bring it to right now, right? It's a pretty good, just a general, I'm going to slap on an Assault Vest Pokemon. T-Tar can be that. It can turn into a flying type, give me some flying type offense, have some damage that way. Good defensive resistances, great bulk overall. Just a really good piece, really consistent piece, but does have a few weak spots, right? Like, oh, rain's up, well, now I'm losing because the rain is up and I lost my Weather War, right? Oh, Goldango's faster than me. If I take too much chip, I'm dying to the Goldango before my Dark type is able to deal with it. Right? A lot of minor flaws like that, but still a very strong option. Really, really strong into some of these Psy-Spam Torkoal options as well. So I'm curious to see where T-Tar develops in this format, if it sticks around, but it is still a very strong option. Similar to Garchomp, this was one I had on Fraud Watch going into Baltimore. But it definitely beat those fraudulent allegations. We saw it get second at the tournament along with, I believe, 9th. Don't quote me on that placement. But overall, been a really strong, consistent mon in this format. And it's a ground type. It's a much-needed ground type in this format. It's the ground type that's not a Trick Room sweeper. If you are looking for a ground type that's not meant to be in Trick Room, this is the one. Because it's like you really have Garchomp and the Ursalunas that you're going to be trying to use here. So having Garchomp on the board, really, really strong in that regard. Now, Dondozo Tatsugiri, guys, we know what Dozo Tatsugiri does. One, it got top 8 at Baltimore, so it definitely doesn't deserve to go down. There is a lot of answers for it going around right now, whether or not that's the Haze Primarina, the Clear Smog Amoonguses, right? There are a lot, the Unaware Clefables. There's a lot of things going on that do deal with Dondozo. However, Dondozo on itself is still a very strong core with that Tatsugiri, and it can win games for you. It is staying in the good category. I am not letting this Pokemon go under the radar, because Dondozo, if nobody is ready for it, will win a tournament. And because of that, I don't think it can fall any lower. Glimmora is very strong, always has been, and in a slower paced format, just having the ability to, whether or not you're getting toxic spikes up, whether or not you're launching massive meteor beams, there's no real switch-ins to those, right? If you go with the offensive mode, it's like, wow, you put on a lot of pressure and your opponent has to be ready for that. If you go with the defensive mode and you get spikes up, not a lot is really clearing the spikes right now outside of like that Amoonguss maybe. So you start putting on the slower pressure, you get the toxic going on, and you start putting things on timers. This is very good on Dondozo teams, and it's very good versus opposing Dondozo teams as well. I think Glimmora is a Pokemon that has a lot of potential, and I think there's a lot of options for it to see success moving forward. Dragapult, by far one of the best naturally fast Pokemon in the format, has some stats to back things up as well. There's a huge debate on people wanting to go special or physical. I think special Dragapult is a little bit fraudulent. I am not a fan of the damage output you want it to do on the special side of things. We've seen people try Choice Specs Dragapult. I don't think that's enough damage for it. I think the physical side is where you want to go with that massive, whether or not you're Terra Dragon Outrage, just launching off those Dragon Darts, launching the Terra Ghost Phantom Force perhaps. There's a lot of options with Dragapult. You are the fastest mon in the format, and if you can support that well, you put on pressure into a lot of the rest of this format, and just not being able to die before you get an attack off is great. So maybe you want to pair this with like an Indeedee or a Farigiraf or something along the likes like that, where you just see it with redirection a lot of the times, right? Like I ran Electabuzz Dragapult this weekend. Clefable Dragapult is a big one as well. You pairing it with that redirection where the priority moves can't go into you, and because priority moves can't go into you, you're getting attacks off. And the more attacks you just launch off with, whether you're Choice Banded or Choice Specs damage across the board, it's putting on pressure. It's going to be good. The question is, will it hold up as the format develops, or will people start like running damage calcs for it, be able to survive, kill off a Follow Me user, and then like, bring in their Kingambit and just sucker punch it, right? So there's definitely ways around it, but it is one of the best, fastest offensive options in the format. Clefable, Electabuzz, two of the better redirectors in this format right now. We've talked about both and what they do on the channel already, so I'll probably jump over them rather quickly. But whether you're launching off a much needed fairy type filling with this Clefable, Unaware is cool, so like versus all the setup stuff, you can just redirect and eat, like even if it's +4, it hits you as if it's neutral. So that's very, very strong there. You also then get Electabuzz with just the electric type offense option, whether or not that's Volt Switch, Electro Web, or Thunderbolt. All three of those just put on electric type offense that I have not mentioned an electric type on this tier list yet. So the fact that Electabuzz is the highest electric type, having the electric offense is very, very nice, especially on a lot of teams where it's like, oh, I can now just hit this Pelipper and bring it down to Sash. You can do a lot with that. That puts in a lot of work versus Rain. And I'm very curious to see if Electabuzz sits around in this format or if it does decide to fall off. I don't think it's going anywhere, but it might. Torkoal and Sun, I think Sun is one of the better options versus these Rain teams, because if you can get into Trick Room, especially with Torkoal being your setter, right, and you can win that Weather War, Eruptions and Terrafire Eruptions versus stuff like those Steel types that tend to be on the Rain teams, Eruption is doing damage. The big concern there is you have to find a way to win the Weather War, and we saw Torkoal paired with Jumpluff actually get, I believe, top 64 and top 32 is the same team, but Torkoal has options in this format. If you can win Weather Wars with Torkoal and find ways to do that, this Pokemon is incredibly strong. Winning the Weather Wars, taking away the Rain, and just saying, I match up well into Rain, or wanting to match up well into Rain, gives you that option, and I think it's a very interesting option to see how it's actually going to stick around in the metagame, or if it's just going to fall off again. Volcarona and Blood Moon, I still think they're both really good, but I also think both of them are on fraud watch. They just don't feel great right now. Their play right now tends to be rather linear. With the Volcarona, it seems to be pretty much Quiver Dance stuff. Haven't really seen too many defensive options. I believe the one that did get third had like Will-O-Wisp on it, which is very cool to see. Just that secondary option from that Volcarona. And then the Blood Moon, like I said, it's just kind of people were ready for it. I think everybody was ready, expecting these two Pokemon to be really, really popular into the format. And everybody's just kind of dealt with them very, very well. right? Whether or not it's their own Tailwind and hitting off this Ursaluna hard, whether or not, it's just Haze to get rid of the Volcarona boosts. The Terra Fire King Gambits and those Terra Fire Assault Vest Pokemon really started putting hinder onto Volcarona as well. Lots going on here, but definitely still good Pokemon. Just haven't found that fit in the metagame right now. So they're definitely on the bottom of this good tier. Maybe could fall a tier as well, but I don't necessarily want to be going for that at this moment. Moving on to the not as good tier. These guys are still good, don't get me wrong. But they're just not quite as consistent. A little bit more niche perhaps, but still definitely consistent options. Gallade does surprising amounts of damage, and I think there's a room for Gallade where it doesn't have to be on those hard Psy Spam teams, and I'm curious to see if somebody can find it. Because it's on those hard Psy Spam teams, it does work on those teams, but I think being it's a fighting typing, it has Wide Guard. I think there's room for it outside of that, and I'm curious if someone can find it there. It does work best on those teams though. The two Tauroses, very, very strong. I think what's holding these guys back is their base stat total of 490. Like, it's good. In theory, they do exactly what you need them to do. They do their job well. It just feels a little lackluster in my opinion. Yes, the Intimidate is very good to have. The fighting type offense, very, very good to have. It just feels like it's not well versed in this meta anymore. Like the Primarina walls out both of them. Primarina, like I said, on a lot of teams right now. Yes, it does kind of feel fraudulent, but it does beat both of these guys. Doesn't appreciate it. They both don't appreciate seeing Pelipper on the other side of the field. So the rain teams that you really want to have your fighting type versus the Archaludon for, you just really can't. You're not able to just sit in front of things as well as you like. Although still very strong options. Don't get me wrong. Just feel like a little bit lackluster right now. Same with the Hydreigon. It was all the talk at the beginning of the format. It is still a good piece. Once again, just finding that right team for it. The way the metagame has developed right now just seems to be going away from that Hydreigon. There's better Assault Vest users for support. There's better offensive sweepers. And then if you want to run like the Razor Claw set, that feels like I'm setting up a piece that just doesn't do enough or quite enough. So I think it's still a good Pokemon on the right team, just not quite as slappable as some of the other options. Ninetales, definitely boosted right now. There is so many Steel types. I don't believe in Ninetales right now, although Paul made it work at Baltimore, got second place with it. So clearly there's something there. I'm not fully seeing it right now. I think it's still a little too frail. It does work. It does do things that you want it to do. I just don't think it does quite enough for me. At least I'm not too happy with it every time I try it. But there's no denying that it's good. It did get second place at the regional. So something is there for it. You're just going to have to find it and maybe work a little bit harder with it. Whimsicott, Typhlosion. A lot of this was that offensive mode that picked up. It's still decent. It's just missing that proper way to close that core. Same with the Murkrow. It just doesn't feel... That core of 3 just doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. And I think Whimsicott's cool. It does a lot of things. It gets a lot of things going. It just doesn't actually push things to that next level, right? Once again, really good. Just got to work a little bit harder with it. Same with the Typhlosion. Same with the Murkrow. It's got a couple niches with this Murkrow in terms of Haze, whether or not you go Brave Bird or Foul Play. Both are cool niches. So Murkrow is definitely around as well, but not quite as much. The Arcanines and the Gyarados just, once again, just feel like worse Intimidate options in this format. Don't feel as strong as I'd like them to be, but they're still very consistent Pokemon and can work on the right team. Same with the Gengar. It saw a lot of usage on that Clefable King Gambit team earlier on, and I'm wondering if it's going to fall off now. I feel like it will. I just don't think it's consistent enough to support itself and the rest of its team in this metagame, but I think it's still a decent Pokemon and it can find success, and that's kind of the name of this category. They're good, but they're going to have to be on that right team sort of thing, And same with the Sinistcha, really good, has some decent results this weekend. But once again, is it better than Amoonguss? Is it better than Rillaboom? And I think that's my issue with Sinistcha. Same with Meowscarada. Is it better than the other two grass types that are just absolutely incredible, right? That's what you have to justify, because Amoonguss as a redirector seems a lot better than Sinistcha. Rillaboom as a offensive piece seems a lot better because it has the option to be supportive as well. Meowscarada is just pure offense. Sinistcha feels like it's trying to be like a jack of all trades in terms of like, oh, I can dish out offense, oh, I can be support, but because of that, it's not really mastering any of them, and it's kind of just sitting there kind of on that in-between point where it's like the middle ground between like Rillaboom and Amoonguss, and it's just in that weird spot right now. Still a good Pokemon, it definitely can work, but not quite where it wants to be in the metagame right now, in my opinion. Hisuian Zoroark, definition of mind games, really good Pokemon, and I think if you can play it right, I think it's really, really good. But I think there's so many things that you have to consider when playing this Pokemon that it is very difficult to use correctly. Not that it's not good, but I think the skill level needed to pilot Hisuian Zoroark to the best of its ability is at that next level. And you can still pilot it without that, but I think taking it to that next level, you need to be at that next level. And it's very difficult to pilot properly, I find. So it's still good, but it's not quite there. Garganacl probably should go down a little bit lower, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. It's kind of there. Once again, just slow the meta down. The Salt Cure versus the 3 big steel types is very, very nice. And I'm surprised we don't see more of it on teams right now. Palmet we see a lot of on Dondozo teams, but it's also one of those just quick offensive options where there's no electric offense. And having electric offense and fighting offense on the same Pokemon is very, very strong, right? So, you know, these dark types, some of them like to go Terra Flying, you know, so you can, if they Terra Flying, well, now you hit them with the electric type things, you know, the water types into format, you're hitting the T-Tars, the steel types, you're hitting with the close combats. You can put a lot of burst damage out. You get the Cheeky Revival Blessing as well if you so choose. And it just feels really, really strong offensively. It's a nice little burst damage option. Once again, one of those focus sash users, similar to that Sneasler, similar to that Flamigo, and I think it's very, very strong. Hatterene, Armarouge, Farigiraf, that hard Psy-Spam Trick Room just didn't have a good showing in Baltimore. They're still good Pokemon, but I think it might need a little bit of a rework here. I'm curious to see how it actually ends up evolving as the meta develops, because they're not going anywhere. They're good Pokemon. They're going to have times. They're going to shine in tours. And I'm curious to see where that happens and if there's like a change to the fundamental basics of that team, or if they just kind of keep grinding until it ends up working. Clefairy Magmar, a little bit lower on the tier in terms of the Follow Me users, but still very strong options. And then Dusclops is like my wild card in this list. Hasn't really done much, but similar to that Porygon 2, just where you don't die to things. You know, you just don't die very, very, very quickly, and you're able to sit around, be that nuisance, heal on up, and you can disrupt a lot of teams that way. We haven't found that team for it yet, but I think someone will find that team, and I'd be curious to see if we go back to maybe like the Dusclops Blood Moon stuff that we saw a little bit of way back when, a couple formats ago. I don't remember which format it was, but back at the time, like the Toronto Regionals last year, we saw a lot of that picking up in usage, so I'm curious if we go back to something like that now in a metagame. But overall, definitely still a good Pokemon. I'm surprised we haven't seen as much of it. Okay, I am basically going to go quickly over the good but niche videos. I plan on doing a video on why some of these Pokemon really excelled at Baltimore. So I'll probably have that out hopefully tomorrow. But with that, let's just focus up on these real quick. Vivillon, really, really cool Pokemon. You know, Friend Guard or Compound Eyes Sleep Powder, both are really strong options. Grimmsnarl, we've seen it for a while with the screens. Kamo, I think, is one of the best Iron Defense users in the game right now. Iron Defense, Body Press, puts on a lot of pressure. And I think we'll see it creep into the metagame as it develops. And I'm surprised it did as poorly as it did in Baltimore. Obviously, it had some good usage, and it did have a couple successful teams, but I feel like we're not seeing it as much as we should. Delphox, as I talked about with Indeedee, that fast Psy-Spam option. And I'm surprised at how many fire types are actually finding viability in this format. Delphox, speaking of which, Blaziken, which I ran, to some pretty good success last weekend as well. Just these fast options with the fire types, fast burst damage from these two. It's really, really cool. Toadscruel Weezing, the Wolf special, both did really well on Wolf's team. You know, the interaction there was like you get Weezing, Toadscruel, and even if you switch out Toadscruel, Weezing that turn, the Toadscruel still gets its Mycelium Mite deactivated because it doesn't affect your speed tier until the next turn. So you still get your spores off. You get fast spore, really, really good. Fast ground offense as well is never a bad thing. So I'd be curious to see if these actually pick up, especially after Wolf had good success. Breloom is fun. We saw it do pretty well. You know, you got the Spore, you've got the fighting type offense, just that burst damage, and you got a pretty decent speed tier as well. Fast Spore is never a bad thing, so cool to see. Jump Bluff, once again, that Joe UX9 special. Joe plus Team Builder Key in there. They went crazy with the Jump Bluff this weekend. Couple good results there. Overcoat we didn't see, but I think still might have that niche on certain rain teams because it's one of those Pokemon that if the meta falls appropriately for it, it can be that niche and it can do a lot of things versus a lot of the metagame. And same with Lilligant. Once again, Psyspam didn't have that niche. Psyspam did not have a good run, so Lilligant has definitely fallen to this niche category. But I still think there's room for it in the metagame right now. Really quickly here, we'll take over the decent category here. I'm going to pretty much just talk about some key highlights here on what could break out. Video's getting a little longer than I would have liked. And then I'll just scroll through the bottom one afterwards. But some key points I want to point out. Decidueye really didn't do much. A lot of players were testing, its broken move. You get the broken move in triple arrows, but that's pretty much all it has going for it. It's a little too slow to really fit right now. Braviary, I have now rightfully dropped from the higher tier to this tier. It's done nothing. It hasn't shown me too much success in this format to really justify using it. So they're down here. Mimikyu, I still think could do something. Everything else though, Quackleval actually did day 2, which I thought was pretty cool. It's like Urshifu at home, so that's pretty fun. Aqua Step for a speed boost in a format that's relatively slow, so being able to go fast is never a bad thing. The Slow Bros and Slow Kings, they're going to be around if someone actually wants to try them out. Could be cool. Skeldritch for Unaware, Hitmontop for Intimidate. The other Weezing, which is once again just turning off abilities, is good. Kingdra as a Rain Sweeper, I'm intrigued by. Male Indeedee is fun. But obviously, I don't know how consistent it is. But we did see it on a couple Psyspam teams this weekend, on like those Delphox teams as well. So curious if that sticks around. Hariyama's cool on some hard Trick Room stuff if you can find a niche for it. I think we saw Empoleon do well. I'm curious to see if Melodic sneaks into the metagame. Nothing else down here. Sand with Excadrill has potential, I think, somewhere. Gastron wants to be good on paper, but just isn't in practice. But maybe there's something there. I don't know why Araquanid's performing as poorly as it is. I just feel like maybe there's better options, but Araquanid has an option. Espathra actually made top 16, which is cool to see. Corviknight, I want to be good. I really desperately want it to be good, but I'm not sure if it is. Chandelure, big special attack damage. And Excalibur used to be that breaker, like that balance breaker, but just it's not that balance breaker anymore. It doesn't break the balance as well as you'd like anymore, so it's probably not as good as you'd want it to be. But Chandelure definitely stands out as something that can go crazy, right? The base 145 special attack stat is really strong. Once again, guys, I think everything in this tier and above, all of that, I think you can 100% justify as, yeah, this is good, right? You can definitely make that work, and I mean, you might have to work a little harder on some of them, but you definitely can make all of that work. I will quickly scroll through this tier at the bottom here, where I don't really think a lot of this is ever going to work out very well, but you probably can try it. Once again, I like calling this category the Prove Me Wrong category, because I think that especially in a format like Regulation H, there's a lot of options for things like this to just work out incredibly well. So seeing some of these Pokemon down here may be a bit discouraging at times, but if you really think and you have a hunch on one of these, like Brambleghast, there could be something there, right? I don't think it's very good right now. Crabominable, there could be something there. Serena, Salazzle, right? Like, I think some of these Pokemon I have in this category, right, could definitely have the chance of doing well, but definitely just not in the metagame as I see it right now. So once again, that's that Prove Me Wrong category, but everything in decent and up probably should be able to be capable of being used in the metagame. Definitely feel free to give them a shot. This is my thoughts on the tier list, guys. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, let me know your thoughts down below. Did I criminally underrate something? Did I overrate something? What's going on here? Is Incineroar indeed back? Has it returned? Let me know your thoughts. I like driving the conversation with this one. But with that, if you are enjoying this type of content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. And of course, I really do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you all in a future video.